Hey, I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like.
Podcast below in the description. Check it out.
Raiders, Browns. We talked about it a little bit that it does feel like the Raiders have given back. You know, they beat the Chiefs. You beat the Saints. And here you are. You're playing the Browns. It's a game you got to win. You lose the game. You're under 500. You're 2.5-point underdogs in this game. As I told you at the beginning of the week, I like the Raiders this week. I think this is exactly the kind of game they win. But, I think there's plenty of reason for that to be a big question mark. I understand why. I wouldn't say I'm overly confident. I do think they win this week. But you could argue they got to win this week from a couple different fronts, right? The math of the playoffs is one aspect that you've looked at. And the other aspect is the coaching matchup, the quarterback matchup.
If the Browns were to win this weekend, to me, there'd basically be a shoe-in because they're 6-2. And at 6-2, with some of their remaining games, they're going to end up at 9 or 10 wins with the tiebreaker over the Raiders. So there would then just be one spot left. And hell, the Colts, who are 4-2, play the Lions. So if they win that game, I think it's fair to say the Colts would be on pace for 9 or 10 wins. Now, the Raiders still play the Colts late in the season. But if you go 3-4, how do I take the Raiders seriously to beat the Chargers, to split with Denver? It gets a little more complicated. You pay Jon Gruden, the astronomical amount of money, regardless of $100 million, $10 million a year. You brought him back to get you to go to the playoffs pretty consistently,
right? To
become a credible franchise, to become a consistent franchise. And so far, that just hasn't been the case. They've had little glimpses, right? They had that little stretch last year. I think they were like 6-4, and they beat the Bears in London. It was like they kind of got their mojo. And then they went and got destroyed by the Chiefs, and then they ended up losing the Jaguars, and they ended up getting blown out by the Jets. It was like, same old Raiders. This year, they had little moments, like against the Saints, opening the Vegas Stadium. Kind of kicked the shit out of them. You're like, damn. And then they kind of get their Then they beat the Chiefs. It was like, can this team play with the Bucs? And they kind of were. And then we look up, and it's 45-20. Then all of a sudden, they got the Browns, who for a minute on Sunday, it looked like the Bengals were going to beat them. They come back and win that game, kind of get their mojo back. And now you got Gruden against Kevin Stefanski. If I would have asked the casual football fan who Kevin Stefanski was 2 years ago, there's not a soul who could have told you outside of Minnesota. And most people in Minnesota, because you're the quarterback coach, wouldn't be able to say it.
3 months ago.
Yeah, maybe some fantasy people. He became the coordinator last year. They had big years, but you're right.
If you put his picture up in front of a casual football fan, they'd go, nice beard, but I don't know who that is.
I'm with you. So you're paying Jon Gruden. Like, one thing, I don't expect him to beat the Chiefs. So when he does that, I give him credit. I don't give you much credit for beating you should beat Kevin Stefanski. And I think it's fair to say if you're Mark Davis, you expect him to beat Kevin Stefanski. You've brought in, whether they're good enough or not, like John's been handpicking this fucking roster. He created it. Like, we're not at year one, trying to think of an example. Some of these Joe Judge or Ron Rivera, like, I bet they're looking at 90% of their team like, we got to get rid of these guys. Like John, that's what John said year one. And you know what he did? He got rid of them all. And now he can complain about Corey Littleton's not playing well enough. We need this guy, Cleveland Farrell, to step it up. Arden Key's got to become a pro. They're yours, John. Yours. And one thing we all agree on is their offensive weapons are really good. So you can look at Seattle, guy. Their offense stinks. And they overcome it. Now, their defense stinks. Their offense overcomes it. And I'm not comparing Russell to Derek, but I'd say that their offensive weapons and Derek are good enough if Gruden's some fucking offensive genius to go 9-7, 10-6, right? But there are several other teams. Most of these good teams, have you seen some of the stats on the Titans defense? It's not very good. Like, you as a great coach should be able to overcome a pretty big weakness if you're this offensive guru and he has moments and then it doesn't. Like, he has sneaky, I'll give you one guy, been a little dependent. Like, the reason they beat the Chiefs was because the defense played well. The reason they beat the Saints was because, like, their defense kind of played well against Drew Brees. If his defense doesn't play well, he doesn't just, have these Russell Wilson 40-point games that often. And part of it is, as we've learned, and older Raider fans have told me over the last couple of years, like, bro, you're expecting this, like, Lincoln Riley type Cliff Kingsbury. He's a conservative kind of coach at nature. And you see a quote I saw Derek had I think he talked on Wednesday, was like, we're an air it out offense now. Are you? You have some moments like I watch you and think sometimes you're caught in the middle of the coach wanting to play this game of like control the clock to keep his defense off the field and just let it rip. Just try to score every possession. That would be how I'd approach it, because that's when Del Rio won with Musgrave and they went 12-4 whatever that year. They did just say fuck it, we're just going to score a bunch, right?
Right.
And just
and really, even though their defense has played well at times, it's still by and large they need to be scoring 30 or 32 points to win.
You can't depend on their defense.
No, like they did, and somebody DM'd me, like, you guys didn't, or maybe it was on YouTube, you guys didn't talk about before Gruden kicked the field goal at the beginning of the fourth quarter, they had gotten to stop the series before. It's like, all right, well, I don't think you can rely on that. Those things are aberrations. That is not the norm. The other thing with them right now, they have to kind of take some of those shots because they're not really running the ball that well with Josh Jacobs.
He's saying that he's kind of. I saw Gruden talking about it. I mean, he's not healthy. He's not like banged up where he's on injured reserve. But we have 2 years now of evidence. I like the player a lot. When you play kind of like Marshawn Lynch, like you attack contact, you seek contact, it's pretty hard to sustain 16-game years. Like I think Frank Gore is this all-time outlier running back. When I think Frank Gore, I don't think about a guy looking to hit people. I think he looks to avoid. And that's how now he's an outlier, but Jacobs, one of his best attributes is like running over guys and breaking tackles. If your best attribute is like a car is like running over rocks and like, being really hard on the axles, well, eventually it's going to break. And even you can say the NFL is not as physical as it was in the 90s or 80s. I know this, there's never been bigger, stronger athletes in the NFL. So like, yeah, Budda Baker might not be as big as like, the safeties back in 2000 or 1996, but he's faster, way faster than those guys. So if he weighs 10 pounds less, he's moving at a faster speed. If I hit you in a Honda Accord going 80 miles an hour, or I hit you in a truck going 40 miles an hour, like I'm not some scientist car guy, but I'd imagine the 80 mile an hour could do equal amount of damage as the 40 mile an hour, right?
No,
you like that?
I like that. That's a good one. Yeah.
I know this.
It's hard miles.
One people push back on like the league has gotten very offensive centric, right? And protecting the players. And why are there so many injuries? One theory I have, Guy, is that the athletes have never been faster. So they might weigh a little less at certain positions, but they're dramatically faster. Like I bet Bill Romanowski, for example, who remember he had that streak where he like didn't miss a game for like 15 years, was a middle linebacker. Do you think if Fred Warner and Bill Romanowski in his peak had a race, Fred Warner could probably beat him backwards? And I'm not taking a shot at Bill. Like the league was just bigger guys. The league was a little slower between the box. It's much more spread. It is Big 12-ish, but anyone that watched football on Sundays, like it's still the NFL.
The collisions are still the collisions.
Yeah, and the guy's actually just going faster, so he might weigh a little less.
They might be coming from further too, right? Running a longer distance.
Yeah, that's where I think in this game, like the Browns have been a pretty physical running team, but they still have a lot of weapons. And I'm not a big Baker Mayfield guy. Like Derek's a better player. That's the other thing. Like you have the better quarterback. In theory, you should have the better coach. Like this would be a pretty big. Like they lose this game, I don't think anyone's looking at them like a playoff team anymore, which is pretty crazy. Just because 2 weeks ago we thought they were like a shoo-in.
But again, so where I am with the Raiders, it's not that I think they're at a place where we should expect them to win this game, but I'm not. But I am. The standard here is I expect you to win this game. Odell Beckham's out. Austin Hooper probably is out. The latest update, he had an appendectomy. He's probably not going to play. Baker is.
He did throw 5 touchdowns.
I know, and he's played really well against the Bengals. I played really well this week against the Bengals, or last week against the Bengals. But to me, they still feel like they've got a little bit of when it's going well, it's going really well. When it's going bad, it can go bad for them. Kind of a front-running nature, which doesn't feel fair to say about a team that's 5-2, right? I kind of talk about them like they're 4-3 or 3-4. But I just think if you get your shit together, they are not a team that should beat you. I feel like they beat teams who don't have their act together on a given day, that's where most of your wins come from. It's not usually on a Sunday you turn it on, it looks like Steelers Titans. It's our best against their best. So they don't have their best. They don't have Odell. They've spent a lot of money on Austin Hooper because Kevin Stefanski loves tight ends. Like, those two players not being there, that matters. You should win this football game. Like, you just beat the Chiefs 2 weeks ago. You should beat the Browns. And I'm not even talking about them like the Browns. I'm just saying you should beat this football team.
Yeah, I think the talent overall is relatively similar in this game. That their big trump card is Myles Garrett is dramatically better than anything the Raiders have on defense. But I would just say Waller, Ruggs. I saw Bryan Edwards is practicing again. Obviously, Renfro,
Chubb, and Hunt. Right, they got two guys that are.
But I think Nick Chubb probably not going to play this week. He's been banged up. But Kareem Hunt is probably, when healthy, just as good as Josh. Like, Kareem Hunt was a Pro Bowler 2 years ago. Like, he's a really, really good player. To me, the Raiders, in theory, like, if you're paying all this money, should have a better coaching staff than Kevin Stefanski and his coaching staff. Now, I don't know if that's true, and I'm not confident about that. But if you do, that to me, like, that gives Kyle Shanahan a lot of these edges. Right? That gives Andy Reid over the years these edges. That's the edge in football. Like, is your coach better? Is your coach better? It's one of the cool things about, like, the college football playoffs sometimes. You're just like, it's just Urban Meyer versus Dabo Swinney. Like, they both have an unlimited stocked roster. It's just going to come down to what coaching staff is better. You went to the Alabama-Clemson game. Like, both those teams were stacked, ton of first-rounders, and Dabo just took it to Nick. And then Nick, after the year, was like, fired a bunch of coaching staff. Like, it was that simple. It's a coaching fucking league. Once the talents, like, if you're playing the Jets or whatever, it doesn't matter. But when you're playing, and even if you're the Raiders, if you're playing the Steelers or the Chiefs, most time they just gonna have better players than you, even though you beat them. But when you play the Colts, when you play the Browns, like, if you're a fringe playoff team, so are they. Like, it's you. Like, are you better than Kevin Stefanski? To me, it's just that simple. Is Jon Gruden better than Kevin Stefanski? Kevin Stefanski beats him by 10 points. Like, if we did that draft, like, hey, if you're a GM, would any GM in the league take Gruden over Kevin Stefanski? Probably not.
And that's not
like
even
that can't happen if you're Jon Gruden. You got to win this game.